Ah, DreamWorks, the land of Shrek. Madagascar is a movie I saw in theaters and recollect very little of outside of the usage of I like to move it by reel to reel.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. Yeah, I like to move it. I like to move it, move it.
I couldn't have even told you the type of animals in the film before yesterday. While on a Discord call with some friends, we were playing random games, and the existence of the Ed, Edd and Eddy game somehow led to a discussion of Madagascar being surprisingly decent and having a fun mini-golf game. I happened to own this game from a mystery box I got at a game store and decided to stream it, and since it was hooked up to my PC, I recorded it as well. So now here we are, Madagascar. I've been playing it on the Xbox, but it was also on the GameCube, PS2, and PC, with wholly different versions on the GBA and DS, which appear to be 2D platformers that I won't be covering. Madagascar mostly follows the plot of the film it's based on, with some added stuff to make scenarios for gameplay. A zebra in a zoo named Marty wants to see the wild and escapes into New York. His friends Alex, a lion with a big ego, Melman, a hypochondriac giraffe, and Gloria, a hippo who is obese and sassy and voiced by a black woman, which is questionable, all go to save him, resulting in all of them getting caught and deported to Africa.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
And tranquil. I mean,
Oh, of course. Get them lying first.
But a group of penguins who fancy themselves secret agents take over the boat, shipwrecking them on the island of Madagascar. The group then meets a cast of wacky characters while trying to escape the island and return to New York. In general, Madagascar is a 3D platformer, but it's often broken up with minigames and challenges for progression that I'll cover in a bit. Each of the four main characters, as well as the penguins, are playable and have their own unique abilities. Marty has a kick that can launch objects, can crawl to avoid detection, and eventually gets a fairly janky air dash. He sucks to play as. Alex is the most traditional character and also the best one because he has projectiles. He can roar to damage enemies in an arc around him, which can be boosted with a special fruit in certain spots, throw mangoes as a long-range attack, and gets a claw attack at the very end of the game. And thank God, he has a double jump for correcting jumps, which is a real blessing as the control in this game is a little jerky. Melman can spin and head slam, although the head slam is used exactly once, and also twirl like a helicopter to extend his jump. The science of this is baffling enough, but he can also catch updrafts to go upwards in this state. He controls okay, I guess. Gloria can roll, which is kind of fun, but her roll distance is too long, although it can be cancelled with a jump, but it's still a little hard to use. She also has a ground pound that's rarely used, and when she eats a pepper, she'll continuously charge through everything in her path. The idea of the roll and pepper dash are fun, but the pepper kinda has the same problem as the roll, where the turning radius is too wide and the control is kinda rough. Skipper the penguin is only used in one level where his only real option is to slide, which makes him go fairly fast and knocks over enemies, allowing him to knock them out. He's fine, but I do kinda love his stage. It's also worth noting that outside of 2 levels, the character that's played as is set in stone, outside of 2 exceptions, which allow the player to switch a totem statue. As I hinted at before, each stage has so many varied objectives that they'll need to be gone over individually, but there are a few constants. Each stage has 100 monkey coins, which can be redeemed to unlock costumes, extras, and minigames. A few levels also have skill cards, which unlock new moves for characters when collected, but these are all mandatory. There's no optional moves, unfortunately. The enemies can basically be divided into 2 camps, humans and animals. Humans are usually stealth-based, where they have to be taken out without getting spotted, and animals tend to just kind of stand around waiting to die. They're rarely aggressive. The enemies can also drop tiki statues that refill health and give extra lives, not that you'd probably need them. The game's control is pretty bad. There are games like Mario Sunshine that are infinitely fun and satisfying to play, meanwhile Madagascar is pretty jerky and weird. Characters will go way too far and not stop suddenly enough. The jumps are clumsy and only Alex has a good correcting move. There's some kind of ledge grab mechanic that doesn't seem to work most of the time, where you'll like just randomly not grab certain ledges, and I don't get it. Character attacks snap really hard to enemies, which is nice on paper, but it's weird because sometimes the characters will kind of just like turn around and go wherever they want to focus, especially when you're using Marty to try to kick something. It all feels pretty rough, as you'd expect from a shovelware game like this, and the minigames don't fare a lot better with all of them kind of having their own similar clunkiness. The game is easy in general, it's able to be beaten in maybe 4 hours even casually. Most of the optional objectives are tied to minigames, and even those aren't very hard, usually just kind of tedious, where you're retrying a game over and over again to get a high score. The hardest part of the game, besides staying awake while playing it, is finding all the coins, some of which have really fucking weird requirements, like running on a treadmill for 2 straight minutes, or shooting a dartboard that's hidden in the corner of a room. The game looks and sounds pretty rough, granted it's shovelware so it's hard to expect much. Everything is muddy and ugly and the areas in the game tend towards plain and boring. There's occasional nice areas, I'd even say New York looks kinda good for what it is, but the worst area by far is the cave. The water looks pretty good actually, but it's so fucking dark you can't see shit. The music in general is pretty generic. It doesn't sound like a human made it, it's more like an AI was told to make game music. There's even a fucking rhythm game, like a mini game, and of course that has music, and the music is supposed to be like ravey soundtracks, but sounds more like elevator music. The game's biggest crime is not including I Like to Move It, which was featured prominently in the movie and its marketing. While I'm here, I'll talk about the voice acting, which is surprisingly pretty good. Obviously the voice actors from the movie, like Ben Stiller, Chris Rock, Will Smith's son's friend's girlfriend, Jeffrey Katzenberg, the head of DreamWorks, and Borat? But the sound-alikes are pretty good, and the player characters never shut up, which is sometimes annoying, but they actually have reactive dialogue to unique situations, so like, if you fall off a cliff, the character will mention something about falling off a cliff, or say a line about being in the water when they're in the water. There's quite a bit of voice acting, it's fairly impressive for this. There's also some weird and unique NPCs, like a smoker voiced camel, because, you know, Joe Camel.
He's right! I got what you need!
There's also this weird Xavier Renegade Angel type character who sounds kind of like him.
Yeah, man, I'm great. Fantastic. It's just like, I've got this horn, you know, and I just have to keep charging. But I'm not really charging anything. There's really no purpose to this action. It's just instinct. I don't have a choice in the matter.
The voice acting, it's not the worst thing ever. The game's levels vary pretty wildly in content and length, and a lot of them have unique mechanics that vary in quality and style. The game starts at the zoo with the level King of New York. It serves as something of a tutorial to all the characters in the game, although I'd argue it's not a very good intro to most of them. Most of the levels played as the zebra Marty. Marty gains his kick early on, which lets him kick around objects and open gates, but there isn't much to him yet. Most of Marty's segments are basically wandering to other characters' tutorials. Alex the Lion's segment is a basic tutorial to his movement and his roar attack, but he needs to unlock his double jump, which is pretty lame. This one actually does teach you how to use Alex, the other two don't fare nearly as well. Gloria the Hippo's segment is a really simple foot race against ostriches using her chili peppers to move faster. This mechanic does come up again, so it's kind of nice that they teach it to you here, but not really in race form, so being the only thing that's taught to you about her is kind of weird. There's a weird little fishing minigame here with the penguins, which is just grabbing some fish and hats and stuff. This is the only time this mechanic is used, so I don't get why it's here in the tutorial level. The level ends on Melman the Giraffe's tutorial, and you can't see it, but I put 3 quotation marks around tutorial in my script. His tutorial is spinning with his spin attack to remove garbage from his pen. It's really easy and teaches you nothing except that Melman's spin is really garbage to control. The level does have 2 other points of interest. First is maybe the strangest hidden coins in the game, which require standing on Marty's treadmill for 2 straight minutes before the coins appear. And the only real indication of this is that he just keeps talking for those entire 2 minutes. And there's also a tank minigame. The tank minigame isn't awful on paper, I think. It kind of reminds me of the tank game from We Play, which I think is actually pretty good. But the stage never changes layout as far as I'm aware, and the game is so fucking slow. It takes forever to turn and takes forever to move, it's slow, and even the reflector shield and ricochet bullets can't save it despite sounding fun on paper. The auto aim has the same issue as the general combat in the main game, where it's occasionally really helpful, but makes shooting around corners borderline impossible because your tank will just keep turning trying to shoot through walls. There's an optional objective tied to the tank game, but getting the high score really only requires getting through level 3 or 4. Marty's escape is a stealth mission, one of multiple, and you play as a gigantic quadruped horse with hooves, big clacking hooves, on concrete. All the enemies in this area are security guards who have a flashlight that shows their simple line of sight. They can be taken down with a kick, which I mean, those guys are fucking dead. This isn't the game's only probably murder either. Marty can also launch trash cans at them, and yeah, I think they die from that too. These weird speakers can also be used to manipulate the enemies into moving around, but my question is, why does a zoo of all places have speakers that play horrific monkey screeches?
Hey, what's all that commotion?
You're already at the zoo so that you can hear the horrific screeches live. The whole level is kind of repetitive and slow and ends in a boss battle against the zoo hunter. This battle is dodging his very slow projectiles while knocking out 3 regular guards with trash cans, then doing the same to him. It's an attempt, I guess. After taking out the zoo hunter, Marty escapes into New York. There's another arcade game here too that's basically a really slow version of Galaga with really non-aggressive enemies. Hitting the point threshold on this one only takes about a minute, so it's not like the suffering goes on for very long. Marty has made his escape, and the focus shifts between Alex, Gloria, and Melman, which is a nice change of pace. Unfortunately, NY Street Chase, my sources say NY is short for New York, is a very linear stage, with the streets effectively being long hallways that warp the characters back if they attempt to go off script. Alex's section is pretty dull, considering he does very little besides run through the streets and roar at some cops. There's a little Frogger homage here where the camera goes top down for a big street crossing, which happens again in Gloria's section. It's not that bad, but some of the patterns feel kind of impossible, save for the ability to just jump over cars, which kind of ruins it. Alex's section also has optional rings to jump through as a bonus objective to get some coins. Gloria's section is kind of just charging through cars. Smashing 50 cars is also a bonus objective, but it's borderline automatic. Out of everyone's sections, Melman is the best. He gains the helicopter spin, which, while really weird, is at least a fun option for moving in the air, and this section forces him to remain above the ground by staying on bridges and other platforms. It kind of becomes a solidish platformer for a couple minutes there. This level ends with the group catching Marty and getting deported by ice back to Africa. There's also one last arcade game here, and it's a dogfighting game. Sounds kind of cool, right? It's not, it sucks. The plane can't move vertically outside of raising or lowering elevation. It's incredibly fucking slow, so slow, and borderline impossible to lose as the enemies only focus on the balloon with its massive health pool as opposed to the player's plane. I don't know how you make dogfighting boring. Even Super Monkey Ball is capable of making a good dogfighting game. Penguin Mutiny is fucking weird. It's the tanker mission from Metal Gear Solid 2. It's a stealth mission. It's got a segment that encourages hiding under a box. It takes place on a large boat and goes inside and out. It's weird, and I'm convinced it's a direct homage. The penguins are, as the title implies, aiming to take over the ship. This is the only stage starring the penguins, specifically Skipper, as the rest kinda just stand around waiting for the signal to move forward. Enemies aren't very aggressive, and getting seen isn't an instant fail. The penguins can just slide into them to knock them out. The 2 big mechanics in the stage are the crane and the gun. The crane is used in 2 segments to pick up and remove guards. They have small gated sections that the guards are intended to be placed in so the penguins can pass, but if you want to up your body count,
what you say? That you only meant well, 'cause you did.
Considering this is somewhere in the middle of the ocean, it's safe to say that they're very dead. The gun is used twice, and might also be part of this Metal Gear homage, where you have the kind of awkward, like, semi-first person shooting. They're basically shitty unmoving rail shooter segments with awkward Madagascar controls. The second encounter is the boss of the stage, another zoo hunter, which, what the fuck even is a zoo hunter? He runs around hanging out in windows waiting to die after his goons are dealt with. The penguins then proceed to crash the boat into Madagascar. The next stage, creatively titled Mysterious Jungle, stars Alex, believing they've arrived at the San Diego Zoo looking for the others. Also, a quick side note, in the movie, it's actually after they've come together that they think they're at the San Diego Zoo, but it's whatever. Alex's stages tend to be pretty plain, and this one's no exception. There's a small section where Alex needs to lead bees around, which also kind of seems like something that would happen in a banjo game or something. There's also more of the rings to jump through as another optional objective. The areas of the stage do change as Alex goes through it, and the swamp is kind of cool despite the lazy overuse of spiders with these giant tree branches all over the place. The mushroom protection minigame is actually kind of difficult. Alex just has to roar at roaches to save 4 mushrooms, but the roaches are really fast and the movement is stiff, which makes reacting really hard. I didn't lose, but I came really close. Even though Alex feels the best to play because he's kind of the most normal, his design isn't really conductive to interesting levels. He doesn't quite have enough he can do, so the level just ends with all the characters reuniting as we move into Save the Lemurs. This level sucks hard. The beginning is a climb up a big pitch black vertical cave, and falling starts the whole climb over. It's not challenging outside of being really fucking difficult to see, but Marty is just so unfun. The second part is the windy cave, which is just awful. Wind blows every few seconds, and getting hit by it blows Marty back to the start of the section, because of course it's fucking Marty. Marty's crawl somehow gains an unspoken slide ability here, which means crouching behind ledges can send Marty sliding off of cliffs. There's also a shitty hidden ledge at the end of the wind section, and there's kind of no way to see it coming, so if you don't see it coming, it's just back to the start again. The last section is an on-rails scrolling escort mission, because why not make the worst thing ever? Alex is the playable character here and can now throw mangoes, which means the mission isn't as bad since spamming mangoes is a viable option to defeat the Fusas. This little section here also has Alex rings. I almost forgot to discuss the story of this chapter because it's not really much, but the group meets the lemurs and at the end they get somewhere safer than where they started. Now another weird homage, or less homage but more ripoff. Jungle Banquet is a tiny one-level version of Donkey Kong 64. There are 10 food items that need to be collected in any order, and a fairly wide open hub with various small challenges to do it, and fixed points in the stage, in this case totem poles that can be used to swap between any of the 4 characters. It's a better gameplay style than the rest of the game, and it's a shame it's not used more. There's a new power for Gloria, the hip check. It's basically just a melee attack that she uses in a whack-a-mole style minigame, which is fine. There's one where Alex has to grab onions as they turn red, but before the spiders can take them. This one's pretty bad. There's a game of Simon on giant mushrooms that goes up to 6 notes for the fruit, 10 notes for the bonus objective, and 20 for the bonus coins, which is probably tedious overkill in which I cheated with a pen and paper. There's a different whack-a-mole game using Melman's new head bash ability, which is never used again after it. A time platforming challenge where Alex needs to lead the queen bee to flowers in order. One where Gloria needs to quickly run around a large area smashing watermelons in a time limit, which might be racist. And one where Marty needs to use his air dash to jump, and that's it. There's also a few just hidden out in the open and some Alex rings to grab. It's a mixed bag, but I appreciate a mixed bag over a bunch of nothing, and the Donkey Kong 64 feels are pretty strong, which I actually like. Once all the food is collected, the feast starts, which is entirely inconsequential to the story. At the start of coming of age, Alex has gone crazy from the meat hunger, bitten Marty off screen, and ran off. It seems really odd to have all this happen off screen and not show it, considering how important it is to the plot not only of the game but the movie, like it's the big turning point of the movie. Most of this level is done with Melman and it's pretty standard. At various points, Melman has to stop to throw coconuts, which are just point and shoot, and ends in a somewhat trebuchet-like segment which requires gauging power to hit bug nests. It's fine, it's whatever, variety is good, I guess. There's a small segment as Gloria where she needs to roll or chili run through moles that have various point values. Getting the points needed to progress the story isn't that bad, but the bonus objective is kind of annoying because Gloria's options limit her turn radius and makes targeting moles a little bit difficult. The final Melman segment is some pretty passable platforming with this helicopter jump while also dodging crazed Alex. It's one of the better normal levels, I suppose. It's got a little bit more going on than anything else, and not being allowed to touch the ground and actually having to do platforming is a nice change of pace. And then Back to the Beach comes in and it's another Donkey Kong 64 style level. Sadly the last one. The group minus Alex needs to collect pieces to make a signal for the rescue. There's another trebuchet-like segment where Melman needs to toss lemurs up to a piece, killing turtles with Marty in a time limit. A small boss battle against a racist Japanese albino crocodile.
You want to battle? You must be crazy. My technique is the best. Your style is weak and undeveloped. My pupils can defeat you.
Is that ridiculous accent real?
No, of course not.
Smashing crabs with Gloria's ass to get a wild hog off, running through crates with Gloria, and a few other pieces that are out in the open. This is again the game at its best, there's not much else to say about it. After getting all the pieces, Marty decides to go back for Alex. Marty to the Rescue is a pretty stupid level due to 1, Marty being a shit, and 2, the stage being full gimmick mode. There's a brief normal platforming section on a timer followed by the worst main minigame. Fruit falls from the top with apples being worth more points and occasionally magnet power-ups to draw fruit in. It's slippery in control, but it sounds fine, right? Without the durians that caused Mort to drop 5 fruit and launch him around randomly it might be, but since the field of view is so limited it's impossible to see what's coming, especially as stuff can spawn in mid-bounce. Mort goes up really fast and down really slow, meaning every jump is a gamble. And even getting the minimum 30 is awful, but getting the bonus objective is miserable, especially as the minigame's completion leads immediately to the next section, meaning scoring above 30 but under 40 forces the player to go through the first segment of the level again. The rest of the level is timed Mario 64-esque slides, but with really bad controls. Like, they just don't feel responsive enough. It feels like you're kind of pushing against the character when you try to go left. They just don't sometimes. They just aren't fun or exciting. It's just a bad level, especially considering it's the second to the last one. And the last level, the final battle, isn't much better. It's a 3-stage battle dome that's done as Alex, who now has a claw melee attack. The first stage is fighting a bunch of random Fusa, the second is throwing mangoes at King Fusa, and the third is beating him down with claw attacks when he isn't on fire for some reason. It only takes like 5 minutes and it isn't a very satisfying ending. Everyone gets on the boat and goes back to New York. The end. The game also has a fairly wide selection of unlockable stuff. These are all purchased with monkey coins found in stages. There's some costumes that don't look very good, like Marty's weird flying hat. There's a few upgrades, extra health, which you probably won't need, double healing from totems, which you also probably won't need. The incredibly good coin magnet, it's a lifesaver, especially if you're trying to go for 100% like I did, where it'll just draw coins in from halfway across the stage. It's pretty ridiculous. And a flaming trail of footprints wherever you walk that doesn't do anything, but it's kind of cool. I mean, I don't know. As well as a few mini games. First is Tiki Mini Golf. Tiki Mini Golf is based. The physics are a little off, but the control is pretty good and the course design is actually really fun. There's courses that allow you to jump the ball, ones with moving obstacles, gimmicky weird shit with multiple paths. Shit is really fire. It can be played alone or with up to 5 other people for whatever goddamn reason, as if you'd ever get 6 people together to play Madagascar, and it has a variety of playable characters. The characters all play the same, but you can choose from Alex, Gloria, Marty, and Melman, of course, as well as King Julian the lemur and Maurice, the other lemur. Tiki Mini Golf is unironically the best part of this game by a long shot. Shuffleboard is shuffleboard. It's local 2-player only, there's no AI for it, but it seems fine. It's a regular shuffleboard game. There's a slightly different set of characters from golf. Once again, Alex, Gloria, Marty, Melman, and then Big Louie, who's some human with a wrench who is on the boat level as an enemy. Crocky, who's one of the evil racist Japanese crocodile's minions. Wilbur Hogg, who's a NPC hog who's horny for Gloria, and King Fusa, the final boss. I don't know why any of these people would be playing shuffleboard. Regardless, all the characters once again play the same, but there are 3 unique boards. There's a regular one with walls and a bumper, and one that slopes inwards. I only played it alone, but it seems competent. I don't know a lot about shuffleboard, truthfully. Lastly is Lemur Rave, and it's really bad. It's one of those generic shovelware rhythm minigames that they all seem to have. Buttons flow out from the center and the player presses them as they pass. There's 5 different songs: Softcore Surge, Salvarsan, Mirando de Lotto,
Yes!
A Go-Go,
Yes!
and Peppermint.
Yes! Yes!
All of which are pretty equally bad. They're all pretty generic. Buttons flow out from the center and the player presses them as they pass. The detection seems really off for these. At times I'd hit exactly on and still get misses. It's really just shit to play, not helped by the horrible track list of generic cartoon rave parody episode music. It's really not even worth looking at. It's barely functional and barely a minigame. I also sat through the movie for this video. Curious about the context, I guess? I don't know what I was thinking. The game is for the most part accurate to the movie, although it has minor changes, mostly to add gameplay. Although I'd also venture a guess that they are working from a slightly earlier version of the script during development. This game has more of them being separated when they first get to Madagascar, adds way more to Marty's escape, mostly to give it gameplay, and shuffles around some events, like the beacon being built in the second Donkey Kong 64 level near the end instead of being built early on, as well as cutting the reveal at the end of the movie that the boat is out of fuel and can't leave Madagascar. They also strangely gloss over Alex biting Marty and give a lot more importance to Melman and Gloria, who are borderline side characters in the movie. The Fusa are also built up to be a bigger threat in the game because it needed enemies, and the game adds the Fusa King so it can have an arbitrary boss battle. I guess as an adaptation of a mediocre movie, the game captures the spirit of it very well. The Madagascar game is a mess of ideas. It seems like the game really didn't know where to focus. It's filled with mostly bad minigames, awkward directional shifts, and now that I'm thinking about it, probably too many characters who all can't do enough alone. It probably would have been better with more focus, whether that was in having less, better developed characters, maybe getting rid of Gloria and Melman and just focusing on Alex and Marty, who are the main characters of the movie. Focusing on the Donkey Kong 64 knockoff level style of gameplay, which are way better than the rest, or maybe even just dumping all the mini-games and focusing on the core gameplay. Variety for the sake of variety rarely works out, especially in a game that's only like 4 hours long anyway. It's not as bad as one would probably expect, but it's rarely good or even interesting either. There's a few very small moments where it kind of works, mostly in those more open Donkey Kong 64 style levels. But everything else is really just so bleh. It's like a really solidly mediocre game overall. Anyway, I hope you kind of liked this. I kind of made it as an interim video while I continue slowly plugging away at a certain fighting game for a video. And also a few friends and myself are starting a podcast and discussing this game on there as our first episode. We'll be doing a game every couple weeks as kind of like a gaming book club. So we'll get some more perspectives on this and shitpost and argue, and it'll be fun. And I hope you'll check it out. I'll have a link to it in the description. So thank you for watching.